The marble floors of the five-star hotel gleamed under the warm golden lights. Businessmen in sharp suits rushed across the lobby, while wealthy tourists lounged on velvet couches sipping cocktails. Behind the front desk, the manager adjusted his tie, projecting an air of superiority that matched the grandeur of the place. At that moment, the sliding glass doors opened, and a man stepped in. He was dressed simply, a plain polo shirt, worn jeans, and sneakers that had seen better days. He carried himself with quiet confidence, but compared to the polished clientele, he looked out of place. That man was Manny Pacquiao, though no one seemed to recognize him. Manny walked up to the counter politely, lowering his cap as he greeted the manager. He had just arrived from a long flight and, despite his international fame, preferred traveling without an entourage. He asked for assistance in checking into his reserved suite. The problem started when Manny, out of courtesy, tried to communicate in Mandarin. His accent was imperfect, his words halting, but he was making an effort. Instead of appreciating it, the manager smirked. "Excuse me," the manager said loudly so that nearby guests could hear. "I don't understand your attempt at Mandarin. Please speak properly or step aside for real guests." A few heads turned. Some guests raised eyebrows. Others chuckled softly, thinking it was just another foreigner embarrassing himself. Manny remained calm, nodding respectfully. He repeated his request, still in broken Mandarin, smiling slightly as if patience could smooth over the manager's arrogance. But the manager only grew louder.
"Sir, this is a five-star hotel."
"We don't entertain people who can't even speak decently. If you can't communicate, maybe this isn't the place for you." The words cut through the air, sharp and humiliating. A hush fell over the lobby. Nobody intervened. Businessmen glanced up from their laptops, then looked away. Couples whispered behind their hands. The silence of the crowd was as loud as the insult itself, and yet Manny didn't react. He stood there quietly, his hands folded in front of him, as if absorbing the sting without letting it break his composure. Near the corner, unnoticed by most, a hotel maid in a crisp black and white uniform paused mid-task. She was a tall black woman, her hair tied neatly back, her cleaning supplies cart parked beside her. She had watched the exchange from the shadows of the lobby, her eyes narrowing at the manager's arrogance. Something in her expression shifted, curiosity mixed with recognition. She could sense there was more to this quiet man than the manager realized. The audience hook had been set. Nobody in that grand lobby knew who they were mocking, until the maid opened her mouth. The hotel lobby hummed with quiet luxury, the gentle trickle of a fountain, the faint murmur of business calls, and the clink of champagne glasses. But over it all, the sharp, mocking voice of the manager now cut through like a blade. "Sir," he said, folding his arms and leaning over the counter, "this is a Mandarin-speaking establishment. If you cannot express yourself properly, perhaps you should try somewhere simpler. There are budget hotels down the street. Maybe those would be more comfortable for you." A few guests chuckled under their breath. One woman in pearls whispered loudly enough for others to hear, probably trying to sneak into places he can't afford. A man in a tailored suit smirked, shaking his head as if amused at the spectacle. Manny Pacquiao stood still, his cap casting a shadow over his face. His attempt at Mandarin had been genuine. He respected every culture he encountered. But instead of being met with patience, he was being mocked like a child fumbling with a new toy. He tried once more softly, his accent heavy but his words polite. "I have reservation. Sweet, my name, Pacquiao." The manager laughed openly now, his voice echoing through the marble walls. "Reservation?"
"In the executive suite."
"Impossible." He turned and gestured dramatically to the watching guests. "Ladies and gentlemen, do you see this? He claims to have a suite here. Perhaps next he will say he owns the building." Laughter rippled across the lobby, cruel and dismissive. Some guests smirked. Others avoided eye contact, pretending to be too busy with their phones. Not one person stood up for Manny, but Manny did not flinch. His hands rested calmly on the counter, his posture steady. Years of being underestimated, as a boy selling bread on the streets of the Philippines, as a fighter mocked before he proved himself in the ring, had taught him resilience. This moment was nothing new, yet not far away it was unbearable for someone else to watch. The maid, her name tag reading Grace, tightened her grip on the cleaning rag in her hand. Her dark eyes followed every word, every insult, every condescending smirk thrown at the man in the cap. Unlike the others, she did not see a poor traveler fumbling with language. She saw dignity. She saw humility. And something about his face, partly hidden under the cap, stirred a flicker of recognition. Still, she stayed silent, biding her time. The manager leaned closer, his voice dripping with disdain. "Listen, sir. You may fool others, but not me. Mandarin is not a language for outsiders. If you cannot respect our standards, please leave before you embarrass yourself further." Manny raised his eyes slowly, meeting the manager's glare. His voice was calm, steady, unshaken. "Respect is not language. Respect is action." The lobby grew quieter. The words, though broken, landed heavy. For a second, even the mocking guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats. But the manager refused to back down. His pride had been challenged, and now he doubled down, louder, harsher. "Oh, spare me your wisdom," the manager sneered. "You are in my hotel now. If you want respect, you must earn it. And right now, you are wasting everyone's time." Grace's jaw tightened. She had seen arrogance before. Wealthy guests looking down on her as if she were invisible. But this was different. This was cruelty disguised as professionalism. Pride built on belittling someone else. And something inside her whispered, "This cannot continue." She placed her rag back on the cart and stood a little straighter, her heart pounding. For now she stayed silent, but her eyes were locked on the man at the counter. She was preparing, waiting for the right moment, because what the manager didn't know, what none of the guests knew, was that Grace carried a secret of her own. And when she revealed it, the entire lobby would never forget. As the crowd laughed and the manager smirked, one maid quietly stepped forward, and the balance of power began to shift. The laughter echoed longer than it should have. In a place that prided itself on sophistication, cruelty had disguised itself as entertainment. Guests leaned back in their leather chairs, sipping cocktails, smirking at the man who stood quietly at the counter. The manager adjusted his tie, clearly enjoying the attention. "You see," he announced loudly as if on stage, "this establishment caters to refinement. People who belong here don't stumble with their words. They don't look cheap." His eyes traveled deliberately over Manny's simple polo and jeans. Respectable guests know their place. Manny remained steady. He did not lower his head, nor did he retaliate. His calmness, however, only made the insults sharper. The stillness of his composure seemed to mock the manager's fury, though Manny had no such intention. At a nearby table, a businessman whispered to his companion, "Why doesn't he just leave? He's making a fool of himself." Another woman, draped in a silk scarf, muttered, "This is what happens when you let anyone book online. Standards are falling." No one defended him. No one questioned the arrogance unfolding in front of them. The silence of the crowd was almost worse than the mockery itself, a collective decision to side with the comfortable bully rather than the quiet stranger. Grace, the maid, wiped the edge of her cleaning cart again and again, though it was spotless. Her stomach twisted. She had been in Manny's position more times than she could count, dismissed, belittled, spoken over simply because of her skin color, her uniform, her role. She had swallowed countless humiliations in the name of a paycheck, but this time something felt different. The man at the counter was not begging for respect. He was not shouting or arguing. He was simply standing like a rock in the middle of a storm, and the storm, instead of breaking him, only seemed to reveal his strength. Grace's eyes flicked to the guests. Not one of them moved. Their silence screamed louder than the manager's insults. "Is this what dignity looks like?" she wondered. "To stand firm when the world turns against you?" Her heart pounded. Her throat burned with the urge to speak. But fear clamped down. Fear of losing her job, fear of drawing the same ridicule, fear of being told, and again, to know her place. The manager sneered once more, leaning even closer to Manny. "Why don't you save yourself the embarrassment, Walk out, this lobby is not for you. People like you should know better." The phrase hit Grace like a slap. People like you. She had heard those words, or versions of them, her entire life. In classrooms, on buses, in whispered jokes from guests who assumed she didn't understand. Manny simply looked at the manager, silent. His lips pressed into the faintest of smiles, as if he had already lived through far worse. And indeed he had, though no one here seemed to recognize him. The tension hung heavy, unbearable. The guests shifted in their seats, enjoying the show but sensing something more beneath the surface. The stillness of the man in the polo was unsettling, like a calm before a storm. Grace's hands clenched. She took a small step away from her cart, just one. Her breath quickened. For the first time, someone noticed her. A young guest wrinkled his nose, whispering, "Why is the maid staring like that? Doesn't she have work to do?" But Grace didn't look away. Her gaze was locked on Manny, and her decision solidified with each cruel word from the manager. If no one else would speak, she would. She didn't know how. Not yet. She didn't know what the consequences would be. But deep in her chest, courage began to rise, steady and unstoppable, and soon, the silence that had suffocated the lobby would be broken, not by the manager, not by the wealthy guests, but by the maid no one thought mattered. The manager thought he had silenced everyone, but he didn't know the maid carried a voice now and a secret that would shake the entire lobby. The air in the lobby had grown heavy, thick with the unspoken agreement of the crowd. No one would interfere. The man in the polo shirt was on his own. The manager, now emboldened by the laughter he had stirred, straightened his suit jacket and puffed his chest. "You see," he declared, "this establishment maintains standards. We cannot let just anyone walk in and lower them." His words hung in the air, sharp and cold. Manny stood still, his eyes steady, his composure unbroken. The whispers returned. Why doesn't he just leave? Maybe he's lost. Probably trying to scam his way into a free room. Each whisper was another weight pressing down. But Manny did not flinch. He had learned long ago that silence, when chosen, could be more powerful than anger. In the corner, Grace's pulse quickened. She had heard enough. Every insult from the manager replayed in her head as if they were aimed at her. Her hand trembled on the handle of the cleaning cart, but her gaze never wavered from the man at the counter. He doesn't deserve this. No one does. Her lips parted, then closed again. Fear flooded her. If she spoke, she risked everything. Her job, her safety, her ability to provide for her family. She had seen other staff punished for less, but then the manager leaned across the counter, his voice cutting like a knife. "This is your last warning. Leave now or I'll call security. You don't belong here." The phrase snapped something inside her. Grace took a step forward, then another, the click of her shoes faint against the marble. A few guests noticed her movement. Their eyes narrowed, confused. A maid? What business did she have stepping into this scene? The manager caught her in his peripheral vision and frowned. "What are you doing here?" "Get back to your duties," he barked, his tone dripping with the same condescension he had just unleashed on Manny. Grace froze. Her chest rose and fell as if her body was battling itself. She wanted to retreat, but something stronger held her ground. Her eyes met Manny's. And in that moment she saw not a stranger, but a man carrying the same weight she knew too well, the weight of being underestimated, mocked, dismissed. Her voice trembled as she spoke, softly at first. "Sir, maybe you should listen more carefully. He has been clear." The lobby stilled. Heads turned. Guests leaned forward, whispering, "Did the maid just talk back to the manager?" The manager's face reddened instantly. "Excuse me? Are you seriously inserting yourself into this?" "Know your place, woman." The words stabbed at her, but Grace didn't move. Instead, she straightened her back, her voice a little firmer. "Respect is not measured by language. Respect is shown by how we treat people." Gasps rippled through the room. A maid had just lectured the manager in front of everyone. The manager's jaw dropped. For a brief second, he looked like a child caught misbehaving, but his pride snapped him back. He laughed mockingly. "What would you know about respect? You scrub floors. You don't belong in this conversation." The insult should have broken her. Instead, it lit a fire in her chest. Her eyes locked on Manny again. He gave the faintest nod, so subtle no one else noticed. It was as if he was silently telling her, "Stand tall. I see you." Grace's next words came stronger, steadier, and though no one realized it yet, they carried a secret that would change everything. "I understand him perfectly," she said. "Better than you ever could." The manager froze. The crowd stirred. Confusion spread across the faces in the lobby. What did she mean? How could a maid possibly understand what the man in the cap was saying? The manager's laugh faltered. "What nonsense are you talking about?" But Grace did not answer him directly. She simply folded her hands in front of her, her lips pressed into a determined line. Inside, her heart raced, but her decision was made. For now, she would wait. She would let the arrogance pile higher, the silence deepen further, and when the moment came, her voice, her true voice, would tear the silence apart in a way no one could ignore. The storm was building, and the maid, whom no one thought mattered, was about to become the eye of it. The crowd didn't understand what she meant, but when the maid finally spoke in a language no one expected, the entire lobby froze. The lobby had gone so quiet that even the bubbling of the marble fountain sounded loud. Guests leaned in their chairs, sensing something unusual. The maid who had dared to interrupt stood tall now, her hands clasped in front of her apron. The manager sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. "You understand him? Don't make me laugh. You're a maid. He can't even speak properly, and you expect me to believe you can make sense of it?" Grace inhaled deeply, steadying her pounding heart. For a moment she hesitated, in the years of being told to stay silent echoing in her ears. But then she looked at Manny, at the quiet resilience in his eyes, and the hesitation burned away. Her voice rang out, clear and unwavering, as she turned slightly toward Manny. And this time, she did not speak in English. She spoke in fluent Filipino. "Sir," she said gently, her accent perfect, "you don't need to explain anymore. I understand you." The effect was immediate. Manny's head lifted. His tired eyes widened in recognition. The corners of his mouth curved into the faintest of smiles, the kind reserved for moments when the soul feels seen. Gasps echoed around the lobby. Guests looked at each other, confused. "What language is that?" One whispered, "Is she translating?" Another asked. Grace continued, her words flowing with confidence. "He said he has a reservation. His name is Pacquiao. He asked politely, but you chose to mock him. He showed respect, but you denied him dignity." The room froze. The sound of her voice, strong and deliberate, carried more authority than the manager's bluster ever had. The manager stuttered, his arrogance faltering. You speak his language?" Grace turned to him, her chin lifted high. "Yes, and unlike you, I listen." The crowd stirred. People straightened in their chairs, realizing this was no ordinary maid. She wasn't just cleaning floors. She was dismantling arrogance with words sharper than any blade. Manny bowed his head slightly toward her, murmuring softly in Filipino, "Salamat at." "Thank you, sister." Grace's chest tightened, her heart swelling at the simple gratitude in his voice. For so long she had been invisible, unseen, unheard. But now she was the bridge, the one who gave his voice back its power. The manager's face flushed crimson. His pride, built on years of unchecked arrogance, now teetered on the edge of collapse. But instead of backing down, he tried to claw his authority back. "This is outrageous," he barked, slamming his hand on the counter. "Who are you to speak in my lobby? You think a few foreign words make you important? You're still just a maid." The insult hit hard, but Grace did not flinch. She stepped closer, her voice rising so the entire lobby could hear. "I may be a maid. I may wear this uniform. But respect is not about what you wear or where you work. Respect is about humanity. And right now you have none." The crowd gasped again. For the first time, some of them clapped softly. A businessman lowered his phone, shame flickering across his face. A woman in pearls shifted uncomfortably, her earlier whispers now a memory she wished she could take back. Manny finally lifted his head fully, removing his cap. For the first time, the lobby saw his face clearly. Recognition rippled like a wave. "Wait, is that?" "No, it can't be. Look. It's Manny Pacquiao!" Phones shot up, cameras clicked. The quiet man, mocked for his broken Mandarin, was suddenly unmasked. Not just a guest, not just a stranger, but a global icon. The people's champion, a world boxing legend, a senator. The manager's jaw dropped. His confidence crumbled instantly, his eyes darting between Manny and Grace as if searching for an escape. Manny spoke then, his voice calm but strong. He spoke in English so every soul in the lobby could understand. "You judged me by my language. You judged her by her uniform. But respect is not earned by status. Respect is given because we are all human." His words cut deeper than any punch. The lobby erupted. Some in applause, some in shame, all in shock. Grace felt tears sting her eyes. She had stood up not knowing the man's identity. To her, he was simply a human being who deserved dignity, but now the world knew. The man she defended was Manny Pacquiao, and in that revelation, she found her own strength reflected back at her. The manager, pale and trembling, tried to recover. I didn't know who you were, sir." Manny held up a hand, silencing him instantly. "You don't need to know who someone is to treat them with respect." The words echoed in the vast lobby, and in that moment the balance of power shifted entirely. The crowd erupted. The manager trembled, and the hotel higher-ups were about to find out what justice really meant. The once bustling lobby had transformed into a stage of silence and tension. The crowd stood frozen, their phones raised, recording every second. The arrogant manager's face twitched as he realized the depth of his mistake. He had mocked, humiliated, and dismissed a global icon. And worse, he had done it in front of dozens of witnesses with cameras rolling. Before he could stammer another excuse, a sharp voice cut through the tension. "What is going on here?" All heads turned toward the grand staircase. A woman in a tailored navy suit descended briskly, her heels clicking against the marble. Her expression was a mask of professionalism, but the spark in her eyes showed that she already sensed disaster. She was the hotel director, one of the highest authorities in the building. The manager's face lit with false relief.
Ms. Alvarez!
Perfect timing. This man was, but before he could spin his version, Ms. Alvarez raised a hand, silencing him. She had already noticed the phones pointed at him, the whispers buzzing through the crowd, the way guests were shaking their heads in disgust. She turned her sharp gaze to Manny, then to Grace, who stood protectively nearby. "Sir, ma'am," she said carefully, her voice calm but urgent. "Please forgive any misunderstanding." "Can someone explain?" A voice from the crowd shouted. "The manager mocked him for speaking Mandarin," another added, "and he insulted the maid who defended him." The truth unraveled faster than the manager could contain it. Guests spoke at once, overlapping accusations tumbling out into the air. The manager's face drained of color. He raised his hands desperately. "Wait, this is not what it looks like." But Ms. Alvarez's stern glare silenced him again. She turned to Grace. "Is this true?" Grace hesitated. Her chest rose and fell quickly. This was the moment she feared, speaking out against someone higher than her in front of her superior. But then she remembered Manny's words. Respect is not about status. Respect is given because we are human. Her hands tightened at her sides, but her voice was clear. "Yes, it's true. He mocked this gentleman, and when I tried to defend him, he insulted me too." The crowd erupted in murmurs of support. "She's telling the truth." We all heard it. "It's on video." The manager looked around wildly, sweat forming at his temples. "This is ridiculous." I was maintaining standards. "That's my job." Manny finally stepped forward, removing his cap completely. Gasps swept the lobby again, louder this time. Everyone could now clearly see his face. His identity was undeniable. "That man," a guest whispered, trembling with excitement. "It's Manny Pacquiao." Phones shook as guests zoomed in, capturing the legendary boxer standing calmly beside the maid. Ms. Alvarez's composure slipped for the first time. Her eyes widened and she drew in a sharp breath. "Senator Pacquiao?" She stopped herself, realizing her mistake. This was not the time to address him with titles or flattery. It was the time to act. She turned sharply to the manager. "You are suspended. Effective immediately. Security will escort you out." The manager's jaw dropped. "Suspended? You can't." "I can," Ms. Alvarez snapped, her voice cold as steel. "You insulted a guest. You disrespected a staff member, and now you've embarrassed this entire establishment in front of the world." Two uniformed security guards approached. The manager tried to protest, his words stumbling over each other, but the crowd had already turned against him. Some clapped, others jeered. Phones documented his downfall from every angle. "Please, Ms. Alvarez, I didn't know who he was," he pleaded, his voice breaking. And that was when Manny spoke, his tone calm but unyielding. "You shouldn't need to know who someone is to treat them with respect." The words landed like a knockout punch. The crowd erupted in applause. Some even cheered, chanting Manny's name. Grace stood frozen, tears welling in her eyes. She had defended a man she thought was just a humble traveler, and now, he was using his platform to highlight the same truth she had fought to voice. The manager was escorted out, his protests fading into the distance. Ms. Alvarez bowed slightly to Manny and Grace. "On behalf of this hotel, I deeply apologize. Please allow us to make this right." But Manny shook his head, his humility shining even in this moment of power. "It's not about me," he said. "It's about her." He turned to Grace. She was brave when everyone else stayed silent. The crowd's eyes shifted to Grace. For the first time in her life, she was not invisible. Strangers looked at her with admiration. Phones filmed her as though she were the true hero of the story. Grace's lips trembled. She bowed her head, overwhelmed. I only did what was right. Manny smiled gently. That's exactly what makes it powerful. The crowd clapped louder. Grace wiped at her eyes, half embarrassed, half proud. For the first time in a long time, the balance of power in the grand hotel lobby had shifted, not toward wealth, or language or titles, but toward something far stronger. Simple, human dignity. The manager was gone, the crowd applauded, and the world would soon hear this story. But what Manny did next gave Grace the closure she never expected. The lobby still buzzed with energy, like the aftermath of a powerful storm. Guests stood in clusters, replaying the events they had just witnessed, their voices full of awe and disbelief. Security had already escorted the disgraced manager away, and Miss Alvarez, the director, remained nearby, trying to salvage the hotel's dignity. But in the middle of it all, Manny Pacquiao and Grace stood side by side, the boxer in his simple polo shirt, the maid in her crisp black and white uniform. Two figures the world would normally never put together. Yet in this moment, they were united by courage. Manny turned to Grace, his expression softening. He spoke in Filipino again, so only she understood. You reminded them what respect truly means. Thank you. Grace swallowed hard, her throat tight with emotion. I only spoke because I couldn't stay silent, she replied. But I never thought anyone would listen. Manny smiled gently. Sometimes one voice is all it takes to awaken a room full of silence. Around them, the applause had not stopped. Guests came forward, shaking Manny's hand. But many also turned to Grace, thanking her, congratulating her, even asking for selfies. She was overwhelmed. For years, she had walked through these halls unseen, just another maid blending into the background. Now she was the center of admiration. One guest, a young woman clutching her phone, said tearfully, "You gave me courage. I've stayed quiet too many times when people were treated badly. But not anymore. Thank you." Grace's heart swelled. For the first time, she felt her voice mattered. Ms. Alvarez cleared her throat, stepping forward with a mix of respect and urgency. Senator Pacquiao, Grace, I assure you this hotel will do everything to repair this mistake. Grace, your bravery will not be forgotten. Grace bowed slightly, unsure how to respond. She didn't seek promotions or recognition. All she wanted was simple dignity. But still, her chest warmed at the director's words. Manny looked around the lobby, addressing everyone now. His voice carried the weight of experience of countless battles both inside and outside the ring. You all saw what happened today, he said, his tone steady. A man judged me because of how I spoke. He judged her because of her uniform, and many of you stayed silent. The crowd shifted uneasily. Some lowered their eyes, but one person, one maid, one voice, chose to stand up. She defended a stranger, not knowing who I was. That is true strength. The silence deepened, heavy with reflection. Manny's words pierced deeper than any punch he had ever thrown. He continued, his gaze sweeping across the room. Respect should not depend on wealth, on power, or on fame. Respect belongs to everyone. If you judge by appearances, you will always be blind. But if you judge by heart, you will always see clearly. Applause erupted again, louder than before. Some guests even cheered. Grace lowered her head, tears sliding silently down her cheeks. Manny turned back to her, and with a quiet gesture, he reached into his pocket. He pulled out a folded piece of paper, his reservation slip. But when he handed it to her, she noticed there was writing on the back. Confused, she unfolded it. Her eyes scanned the words and her breath caught. It wasn't just a note, it was a message written in Filipino. Grace, never think your voice is too small. Today you changed a room. Tomorrow you may change the world. Manny Pacquiao. Her hands trembled as she held it. She pressed the note to her chest, overwhelmed. Thank you. I'll never forget this, Manny smiled warmly. Neither will they. He nodded toward the crowd, who continued recording, documenting every moment. This story will spread far beyond this lobby. Let it remind people everywhere. No one should ever be judged by language, by uniform, or by appearance. Ms. Alvarez bowed her head, humbled. We will honor this, Senator. And Grace, I promise your courage today will be recognized. Grace stood straighter, no longer trembling, no longer hidden in the background. For the first time, she felt truly seen, not as a maid, not as a uniform, but as a person. As Manny walked toward the elevator, the crowd parted like a tide, giving him space. Grace remained in the center of the lobby, still clutching the note. Guests whispered around her, but this time their words carried respect. She's the real hero. That maid taught us all a lesson. Imagine the courage it took. Grace closed her eyes briefly, inhaling deeply. For years she had been silent. Today she had spoken, and her voice had echoed louder than she could have ever imagined. Silent doesn't mean powerless. Dignity doesn't depend on status. If you believe respect belongs to everyone, type respect in the comments and share this story so more people remember it. The lobby eventually quieted, but the story was far from over. Guests uploaded their videos within minutes. By the time Manny Pacquiao reached his suite upstairs, clips of the confrontation were already spreading like wildfire across social media. Hashtags trended within the hour. Respect for all, Manny and the maid, Grace speaks. The footage was raw, shaky but powerful. Millions watched as the maid stood her ground, her voice trembling yet firm, defending a man everyone else had ignored. The moment she revealed her fluency in Filipino, the moment Manny removed his cap, those frames were replayed over and over. Stitched into compilations, slowed down for dramatic effect, the internet had found its newest story of justice. Meanwhile, in the small staff quarters of the hotel, Grace sat on the edge of her narrow bed, still holding Manny's handwritten note. The day felt like a dream, surreal, terrifying, overwhelming. She had never imagined her name would be known beyond the quiet corridors she cleaned. Yet now, her phone buzzed relentlessly with messages from coworkers, friends, even distant relatives. You're all over Facebook. Grace, I saw you on TikTok. You're trending. Your voice. You made us proud. Her hands trembled as she scrolled through the comments online. Thousands of strangers praised her bravery. Some called her a hero. Others shared their own stories of being silenced, of staying quiet when they should have spoken. Grace's eyes blurred with tears as she read them. But not everyone was kind. Mixed among the praise were sharp daggers of criticism. She was just lucky Manny was famous. She wants attention. Maids should know their place. The words stung, but she clutched Manny's note tighter. Never think your voice is too small. His message was her shield against the cruelty. Back in the hotel lobby, Ms. Alvarez gathered the remaining staff. Her tone was urgent but softer than usual. What happened today cannot be erased, she admitted. But we can decide what we learn from it. From this day forward, no staff member, no guest, no human being in this building will be disrespected because of how they look, dress, or speak. Is that clear? The staff nodded, some nervously, others with genuine relief. For once, Grace's courage had shifted the culture inside those grand marble walls. By evening, news outlets had picked up the story. A popular headline read, "Hotel manager fired after mocking boxer Manny Pacquiao. Saved by maid's courage." Another article focused not on Manny, but on Grace, the maid who spoke truth to power. Meet Grace, the voice of dignity. Grace's world was spinning. She wasn't ready for interviews, cameras, or fame, but she knew this story wasn't about her alone. It was about every person who had ever been silenced, every worker who had been overlooked, every guest who had been judged. The next morning, as Grace reported for her usual shift, something unusual happened. Guests greeted her warmly. Some stopped to shake her hand. One even said, "You gave me hope for my daughter." Her fellow staff treated her differently too. They weren't just polite, they were proud. For years, Grace had been invisible. Now she was seen. Still, she kept her humility. She continued pushing her cart, dusting furniture, polishing the brass fixtures. Fame did not change her sense of duty, but inside she carried something new, a quiet strength, a certainty that her voice mattered. Meanwhile, Manny gave a short statement to reporters waiting outside the hotel. His words echoed what he had said in the lobby, but carried further weight now that the world was listening. "You don't need to be famous to deserve respect," he said. Grace reminded us of that. She stood for what is right when everyone else stayed silent. That is real courage. That is real strength. Clips of his speech circulated online alongside the viral lobby video. Together, they sparked conversations in schools, offices, and families. People debated, reflected, shared. Hashtags became movements. Teachers used Grace's story in classrooms. Activists quoted Manny's line, "You shouldn't need to know who someone is to treat them with respect." It was bigger than a single incident. It was becoming a symbol. That night, Grace sat alone in her small room again. The noise of the world buzzed on her phone, but she tuned it out. Instead, she unfolded Manny's note once more. She read the words slowly, letting them sink deeper into her heart. "Today you changed a room. Tomorrow you may change the world." Her lips curved into a small, quiet smile. For the first time, she believed it might be true. But while the world celebrated Grace, one powerful figure from Manny's past saw the viral video and decided to get involved. By the next morning, the story was no longer just trending online. It was on television and newspapers and even discussed on radio talk shows. Grace's face appeared alongside Manny's in split-screen images. One headline read, "From Maid to Hero: How Grace Stood Up for Manny Pacquiao." The attention was surreal. Grace felt torn between pride and fear. She wasn't used to being the center of anything, let alone global attention. All she wanted was to do her work quietly, earn her living, and send money back home to her family. But life had other plans. Late that afternoon, while she was polishing brass railings near the grand staircase, Ms. Alvarez approached with a peculiar look in her eyes, a mix of nervousness and awe. "Grace," she said softly, "there's someone here to see you." Grace blinked. "To see me? Why?" "You'll understand soon," Ms. Alvarez replied, motioning her to follow. They walked through the polished corridors until they reached one of the hotel's private lounges. The doors opened and Grace froze. Sitting inside with the same quiet composure as always was Manny Pacquiao himself. Grace gasped softly, instinctively bowing her head. "Sir, Senator, I didn't expect—" Manny rose to his feet, his smile warm. "Grace, please, no titles. Just Manny. Come sit." Her legs trembled as she sat across from him. The room was quiet except for the hum of the air conditioning. For a moment she didn't know what to say, but Manny broke the silence. "You changed more than my day," he said. "You reminded the world what respect looks like. And I want to thank you properly." Grace shook her head quickly, her voice urgent. "Please, sir, I didn't do it for thanks. I know," Manny interrupted gently. "That's exactly why it matters." He leaned back, his eyes thoughtful. "Do you know how many times I've been judged for where I came from? For being poor, for being uneducated, for speaking imperfectly. People laughed at me, dismissed me, but I never forgot those who stood by me. And now you've become one of them." Grace's eyes blurred with tears. She clasped her hands together to keep them from trembling. Then Manny leaned forward, his tone more serious. "Next week, I'm attending a charity gala in the city. It's an event to raise funds for children who can't afford school. I want you to come with me as my guest." Grace's mouth fell open. "Me? But I'm just a maid." Manny shook his head firmly. "No, you are the woman who stood when others stayed silent. You deserve to be there to show the world what courage looks like." Grace's breath hitched. The idea terrified her. The cameras, the crowd, the possibility of being out of place. But another voice echoed in her mind. "Never think your voice is too small." After a long pause, she nodded, her voice soft but steady. "If you believe I should go, then I will," Manny smiled. "Good. The world needs to hear voices like yours." As Grace left the lounge, her heart raced. She could hardly believe what had just happened. Her life had shifted in ways she never imagined, from a silent figure in the background to someone invited into spaces of power and influence. But not everyone celebrated. Across town, the disgraced manager sat hunched over his phone in a dimly lit bar. His face was plastered across the internet, mocked and condemned. His career in hospitality was in shambles. He scrolled through video after video of Grace being praised, his teeth grinding. "That maid," he muttered bitterly. "She ruined everything." His pride, wounded and burning, twisted into resentment. He wasn't finished with this story. Not yet. Meanwhile, Grace returned to her modest staff quarters. She sat on her bed, staring at Manny's note and now replaying his invitation. For years, her life had been small, predictable, and safe. But tomorrow promised something else. A new world, a new chance, and perhaps even a new purpose. She wasn't sure if she was ready. But she knew one thing for certain. She could no longer go back to being invisible. Grace thought her journey ended in the lobby. But at the gala, under the brightest lights, her courage would face its greatest test yet. The night of the gala arrived like a whirlwind. The city sparkled with energy, its skyline glowing against the velvet night. Luxury cars lined the streets outside the Grand Convention Center, their polished exteriors reflecting the flash of cameras. Inside, the red carpet stretched like a river of fire beneath crystal chandeliers. Celebrities, politicians, and business moguls flowed in, their laughter echoing in the air. And among them, walking quietly at Manny Pacquiao's side, was Grace. She wore a simple but elegant navy blue dress provided by the event organizers. Her hair was pulled back neatly, her shoes modest but new. She clutched a small clutch bag nervously, feeling every pair of eyes on her. "Just breathe," Manny whispered as they walked together. "Remember, you belong here." Grace nodded, but her heart hammered in her chest. She had spent years blending into the background. Now she was in the spotlight, and the weight of it was terrifying. Reporters swarmed the entrance, shouting questions. "Senator Pacquiao, who's your guest tonight?" Manny paused, turning so the cameras could see Grace clearly. His smile was calm but purposeful. "This is Grace," he said proudly. "She is not just my guest. She's the reason we are here tonight." Gasps rippled through the reporters. Flashes exploded like fireworks. Grace blinked, overwhelmed by the sudden storm of attention. But Manny guided her gently forward, steadying her. Inside, the ballroom glittered with golden light. Round tables draped in silk filled the space, each one adorned with candles and flowers. A stage stood at the front where a large banner read, "Education for All, a gala to support the children." Grace sat at Manny's table near the stage, surrounded by powerful figures she had only ever seen on television. At first, she kept her eyes low, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. But when she glanced at Manny, he gave her a reassuring nod. "This is your moment too," he murmured. The evening unfolded with performances, speeches, and an auction. But everyone waited for the keynote, Manny Pacquiao's address. When his name was called, the room erupted in applause. He stood, walked to the podium, and glanced back at Grace. She froze. Was he going to mention her? He began with his usual humility, thanking the organizers, speaking of the importance of education, and sharing his own story of rising from poverty. Then his tone shifted, heavier, more personal. "2 days ago," Manny said, his voice carrying across the silent hall, "I was reminded of something important. I was reminded that respect does not come from fame, wealth, or power. Respect belongs to everyone simply because we are human." The crowd leaned forward, he continued. "In a hotel lobby, I was mocked for the way I spoke. Many people watched, but only one person stood up for me. She did not know my name. She did not care about my fame. She only cared about dignity. That person is here tonight." He gestured toward Grace. Her heart stopped. A spotlight swung toward her, illuminating her in her modest navy dress. Gasps rippled through the crowd as people turned to look at her, the maid whose courage had gone viral. Grace's hands trembled under the sudden blaze of attention. She wanted to sink into the floor to hide, but Manny's eyes found hers, steady and kind. "Stand tall," they seemed to say. Slowly, she rose from her chair. Applause began, hesitant at first, then growing louder, stronger, until the entire ballroom was clapping. Some even stood. Cameras flashed. Grace blinked back tears, bowing her head humbly. Manny's voice rang out again. "Her name is Grace. She reminded me, and she reminded all of us, that silence in the face of injustice is still a choice. And she chose courage," the applause thundered. Grace sat back down, her chest heaving with emotion. She could hardly believe it. The same woman who once scrubbed floors unseen was now honored in front of the world. After the speech, several guests approached Grace personally. A philanthropist offered to sponsor her family's needs. A teacher told her she would share Grace's story with her students. A journalist asked for an interview. Grace's head spun, but she remained humble, thanking them softly. Later, as the gala ended, Manny placed a hand on her shoulder. "Tonight, you inspired more people than you realize," he said. "You gave a voice to every worker, every forgotten person, every one of us who has ever been silenced." Grace's eyes brimmed with tears. "I didn't know I could do that," Manny smiled. "That's the beauty of courage. It shows you who you really are." Outside, the night air was cool. The red carpet was nearly empty now. The camera's gone. Grace stood with Manny beneath the glittering city lights. She clutched the note he had given her days before, still folded carefully in her purse. "Thank you," she whispered. Manny shook his head. "No, thank you. You reminded us that respect is not a privilege to be earned. It is a right we owe each other, every single day." They stood in silence for a moment, watching the cars glide past, the city alive with energy. Grace felt something stir inside her. A quiet, unshakable certainty that her life would never be the same again. She had been invisible once. Not anymore. Respect doesn't belong to the wealthy. It doesn't belong to the powerful. Respect belongs to everyone. If you believe no one should ever be judged by their language, their uniform, or their appearance, type respect in the comments and share this story so the world remembers.